Welcome to the NC Spin After Spin. Additional comments from our panelists just available on our website. I want to ask each of you, what do you wish you had said on last week's show, but you didn't? John Hood, I'll start with you.
Tom, we talked about Donald Trump and his spats, repeated fights with the media, how that is likely to continue. But we didn't talk very much about the other tensions that the episodes of the first week of the Trump administration surfaced, and they had to do with tensions between the president and his staff. Sean Spicer, the spokesperson, was clearly out there saying things that Trump then took back and changed the message around 24 hours later. Other staff members were saying things that were contradictory. There's already been some reporting from inside the administration. By the way, a bad sign, in the first week of a presidency, people are already leaking to the Washington Post. They will continue to do this. This is going to be an administration, I think, full of publicly displayed acrimony and lots of churn, lots of turnover in the staff.
Interesting. Bob Orr, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, we talked about the education litigation case between the State Board of Education and the legislature over the shifting of powers, attempt to shift powers from the State Board to the superintendent. It is an extraordinarily important constitutional question, and it goes to the issue that we talked about in addition to that about who's in charge. And the State Board has constitutional powers. The superintendent is a constitutional officer with limited powers, and then you have the governor and the legislature, and to the point that I think that you made.
And when you read the article in the Constitution, right, about the separation of the powers, it says the State Board of Education has the power to administer and supervise public education in North Carolina, but then it has this crazy little codicil about unless legislation is passed to the contrary.
Well, it doesn't quite say that. It says subject to laws passed by the General Assembly.
Right.
But
I was going to say that.
But whatever that means, it doesn't mean that the General Assembly has the authority to shift specific constitutional powers of one entity and give those powers to a different entity. And that's really at the heart of this litigation.
Rufus Edmiston, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, I want to go back to the separation of powers arguments, and I've said that a while ago and a little bit too quickly on the regular show. I had an episode in the late 70s where the Speaker of the House at that time, Mr. Liston Ramsey, asked me to give a ruling on whether or not the Advisory Budget Commission was an executive office, and the Constitution's clear about that. I think Judge Orr would agree. And I gave a ruling thusly, and Speaker Liston Ramsey took it very nicely, but a man named Mr. Billy Watkins didn't.
Your good friend.
Yeah, and he called me into his office and he said, "What do you think you're doing, boy?" And I said, "Well, I'm just calling it like I see it." He said, "I'll take your car away from you." I thought, well, I guess you can. I've got about 290 SBI agents, so I think they'll furnish me a car. And then lo and behold, I've forgotten the case, Justice Orr can tell us. The court later vindicated me, and I felt like I had done a good job.
All right.
Wallace v. Bone.
Wallace v. Bone. Who would remember such things as that? Chris, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well, we spent the first segment talking about the news media and the importance of the news media and how we define the news media. I think whatever you think of the news media, and I think by and large the traditional news media, they have problems, but they do a good job. The problem is they're shrinking at a rate that I think ought to worry people, whatever your political affiliation. That's why nonprofits, whether it's the Locke Foundation and Carolina Journal, NC Policy Watch, and other groups are hiring reporters and trying to keep up, because the democracy depends on people understanding what their politicians are doing, what are the facts, holding politicians accountable, making sure they're not wasting money, making sure they're not doing things, scurrilous things they shouldn't be doing. And most politicians don't do those, but some do. And the media plays a huge role in making sure the public knows about that and can vote for other people, not just from their philosophy, but how they behave in office. And I'm really worried about the future if we don't have enough people watching public officials, and I think that's a journalist's role. But isn't there
also a concern, Chris, that in many cases, particularly the reporters that are covering state government and the courts and so forth like that, have less experience than they have had in fewer years? And furthermore, these reporters who are covering state government and other issues, it used to be that a reporter would be assigned one story a day or one
Right.
story every 2 or 3 days. Now they're having 2 or 3 stories a day
Well,
they're having to report.
and that makes it a lot harder. And as we've talked before off the air, there used to be several newspaper reporters from all over the state whose only beat was the governor's office, and they would cover everything in the governor's office, everything the governor said, just report it. They'd investigate it too. They'd find out what was going on. There's very few people now in North Carolina whose job it is to keep up with the governor. Now, whatever you think of the governor, reporters, there ought to be somebody who's assigned to keep up with the governor.
And I can
that's
remember
becoming
the
a big
day in the
problem.
legislature when there was no room in the legislative press office. It was just jam-crammed full. You could fire a cannon in there today and it wouldn't hurt
Asheville
anybody.
Citizen even had someone there full time.
Well, thanks for watching the After Spin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.